Welcome to EnglishPass Podcast, brought to you from our local studio in Calgary. I'm your host, Samantha, and today we're diving into an exciting topic: living on low wages. Whether you're a beginner or intermediate learner, in this podcast, we're helping you level up your English listening and reading skills. And before we get started, let me tell you that the sponsor of this episode is TypeFit, keyboard typing practice and learning service. Today, we're exploring something really interesting: living on low wages. This is an amazing subject for English learners because it covers a lot of practical vocabulary and real-world situations. So, let's dive right in. Living on low wages is a multifaceted reality that millions of individuals and families navigate every single day across the globe. To understand this topic, we must first define what a low wage actually is. Generally, a low wage refers to an income level that is barely enough to cover the most basic human needs, such as food, shelter, and clothing. In many countries, this is closely tied to the concept of the minimum wage. The minimum wage is the lowest amount of money that an employer is legally required to pay an employee for their work. However, there is often a significant gap between this legal minimum and what experts call a living wage. A living wage is the theoretical income level that allows an individual or a family to afford adequate housing, health care, nutritious food, and other essentials in their specific community without falling into debt. When the minimum wage is much lower than the living wage, people are forced to make difficult choices between which necessities they can afford each month. Historically, the idea of a government-regulated wage floor is a relatively modern invention. The first minimum wage laws were established in New Zealand and Australia in the late 1890s as a response to industrial unrest and the exploitation of workers. In the United States, the federal minimum wage was not created until 1938 as part of the Fair Labor Standards Act during the Great Depression. The goal was to protect workers and ensure that their labor would provide a decent standard of living, which refers to the level of wealth, comfort, and material goods available to a person. However, a major challenge over the last several decades has been inflation. Inflation is the economic process where the prices of goods and services increase over time, meaning that each dollar or pound earned has less purchasing power than it did before. If wages do not rise at the same rate as the cost of living, the total amount of money needed to sustain a basic level of daily existence. Workers effectively experience a pay cut every year as their expenses grow faster than their income. To see how this looks in the real world, consider the example of Maria. Maria works 40 hours a week at a fast food restaurant in a major city like London or New York. Even though she works full-time, the cost of housing in her city is so high that she must spend 60% of her paycheck just to rent a small room. This leaves her with very little for other needs. She often has to choose between buying a monthly bus pass to get to work or buying fresh fruits and vegetables for her meals. This is a common trade-off for those on low wages. Have you ever considered how much stress is involved in calculating every single penny before you reach the checkout counter at a grocery store? For Maria, this is a daily ritual. Another important aspect of living on low wages is the growth of the gig economy. The gig economy is a labor market characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs with benefits. Take David, for instance. David works as a delivery driver for a mobile app. He is considered an independent contractor, which means he does not receive health insurance, paid sick leave, or a retirement plan from the company. While he might earn a decent amount during busy hours, his income is highly unpredictable. If his car breaks down, he not only has to pay for the repairs, but also loses his ability to earn money until the car is fixed. This lack of a safety net is a defining feature of the modern low-wage experience. There is a common misconception that low-wage jobs are exclusively held by teenagers or students who are just looking for extra spending money. In reality, the demographics of low-wage workers are much broader. Many are adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are the primary breadwinners for their households. Consider Linda, who works as a home health aide. She provides essential care for elderly patients, helping them with daily tasks and medical needs. Despite the high level of responsibility and the physical demands of her job, she earns very little. This reveals a cultural note about how different types of work are valued. In many societies, caregiving and service roles are among the lowest paid, even though they are vital to the functioning of the community. In a globalized world, low wages are also part of a larger supply chain. Elena, a young woman in Bangladesh, works in a garment factory sewing clothes that will eventually be sold in high-end stores in Europe and North America. Her wages are among the lowest in the world, often falling below the local poverty line. The poverty line is the minimum level of income deemed adequate in a particular country to meet basic needs. For Elena, living on low wages means living in a crowded dormitory and sending most of her earnings back to her family in a rural village. Her situation illustrates how consumers in wealthy nations often benefit from the low-cost labor of workers in developing countries, raising complex ethical questions about global economic fairness. One of the most frustrating obstacles for people trying to improve their situation is the cliff effect. This occurs when a low-income worker receives a small raise in their hourly pay, but that increase causes them to lose access to government subsidies. Subsidies are financial assistance programs, such as food stamps or subsidized childcare, intended to help those with low incomes. Imagine Sarah, a single mother who works 2 part-time retail jobs. If Sarah gets a $1 per hour raise, her total income might cross the limit for receiving childcare assistance. Suddenly, she has to pay hundreds of extra dollars a month for daycare, meaning she actually has less money overall than she did before the raise. This cliff makes it incredibly difficult for people to climb out of poverty, even when they are working hard to increase their earnings. Living on low wages also looks different depending on where a person lives. In rural areas, the challenge is often related to transportation and distance. Samuel works on a farm in a rural part of the American Midwest. While his rent might be lower than Maria's in the city, he has no access to public transportation. He must own and maintain a car to get to work, to the grocery store, and to the doctor. When gasoline prices rise, it directly impacts his ability to buy food. For Samuel, living on low wages means being one flat tire or one engine light away from a financial crisis. This constant state of living on the edge can lead to significant mental health challenges, such as chronic stress and anxiety. The impact on physical health is also profound. People living on low wages are more likely to skip preventive medical checkups or avoid filling prescriptions because they cannot afford the out-of-pocket costs. They may also live in areas with less access to clean air or safe parks for exercise. This creates a cycle where poor health makes it harder to maintain a job, leading to even lower income and more health problems over time. Addressing these health disparities is a major focus for public health experts who study the social determinants of health. In many cultures, there is a strong emphasis on the idea of meritocracy, the belief that success is based entirely on individual talent and effort. This can lead to a stigma against those who earn low wages, as some might assume they are simply not working hard enough. However, the reality is that many low-wage workers have multiple jobs and work more hours than those in high-paying executive roles. The structure of the modern economy, with its shift away from high-paying manufacturing jobs toward lower-paying service jobs, plays a much larger role than individual effort alone. Hard work is necessary, but it is not always a guarantee of financial security in a system where wages have remained stagnant for decades. Financial literacy is often proposed as a solution. Financial literacy is the ability to understand and effectively use various financial skills, including personal financial management, budgeting, and investing. While these skills are undoubtedly helpful, many advocates argue that you cannot budget your way out of a situation where your income is simply too low to meet the cost of basic survival. For someone like Mark, who works as a seasonal retail clerk, his income fluctuates wildly. He might have enough to save a little in December, but by February, his hours are cut so drastically that his savings are immediately wiped out. Finally, we must consider the future of low-wage work in the age of technology. Automation and artificial intelligence are changing the types of jobs available to those with fewer formal qualifications. For a worker like Chen in a manufacturing plant, the introduction of robots could mean the end of his employment. While technology can increase productivity, it also risks displacing millions of workers who may not have the resources to retrain for high-tech careers. As we look ahead, the conversation about living on low wages is becoming more urgent, involving discussions about universal basic income, better labor protections, and the need for a global living wage that ensures every person can live with dignity, regardless of the type of work they do. Because every human being deserves the security of knowing their basic needs will be met at the end of the day. And that's all for today's episode of EnglishPass Podcast. I hope you found this helpful. Remember to practice what you've learned and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we improve. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and join us next time. Let me remind you that the sponsor of the episode is TypeFit, and I suggest to check the link at the description. I'm Samantha, and I'm excited to be your host for many more fascinating episodes to come. Until then, keep learning and keep growing. Goodbye.